where news and talk comes first. We get you all the stories. Stimulating talk is what we do. Power 98.7. Now we're talking.
You're listening to Power Business with me, Tehillah Niselow, 22 minutes before 8. And for much of 2025, we spoke about smelters, chrome smelters, creating ferrochrome and the high energy prices that were affecting them. There were several threats that they would have to shut down, and then several proposals by government to try and save smelters, not only as sources of jobs, but also as a strategic asset for the country. South Africa needs ferrochrome, and one of those proposals by the Department of Trade and Industry was to cut down the energy costs, and in particular, something that's come forward from the Minister of Trade and Industry, Parks Tau, is that companies will be able to group together and share the costs of electricity without violating competition laws. So to understand this a little bit more and some of the energy policy that we should expect going forward into the new year, we're joined now by Professor Vali Pariachi, who's a power and energy expert, as well as being a former executive manager at Eskom and a former senior executive at City Power in Johannesburg. Prof, very good to have you with us, and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening, Tehillah, and season's greetings to you and the listeners. I'm glad to be invited.
Thanks so much. So for much of last year, we were talking about the smelter crisis. Right at the end of the year, there was the proposal that they would cut the price of electricity. What do you make now of the new proposal by Minister Parks Tau that they will be able to essentially buy electricity as a block?
Well, I'm actually excited because that industry, or that sector of the industry, the smelter, let's call it the smelter component of the industry, is a critical part of the South African economy, because inter alia they create lots of jobs over the years, over the decades, and as I say, they contribute significantly to the economy. And pursuant to that, they enjoyed that luxury because they enjoyed, to keep it simple, in ordinary man's language, they enjoyed cheap electricity. Unfortunately, since 2008, we've incurred 900% increase in the cost of electricity, so that what's happened now is that we've lost that competitive edge from that sector of the industry, where at one time they were a major exporter of processed minerals. Now we've lost that edge to China, and a number of the smelters have shut down, closed down, and the danger is that we could be losing lots more jobs and a significant impact to the economy. So I'm glad that with all of the initiatives during the course of the year, that we've now got this new initiative by Minister Parks Tau, and hopefully when it's finalized, we get back to a state where these companies become a major exporter of processed minerals and contribute again to the economy of South Africa in a balanced, prudent manner. Tehillah, and I'll talk about that just now.
Okay, we'll talk about what you mean by balanced and prudent manner, because of course, if the smelters are paying less for electricity, it will have to be subsidized from other places, and there will have to be some kind of trade-off regarding that. It's very crucial to understand how these smelters fit in with South Africa's overall industrial policy, and whether perhaps that electricity or the cost on subsidizing the electricity could perhaps be better used elsewhere.
Well, maybe let's address that very quickly. Although I support the initiative, I think as South Africans we would welcome this initiative, but we've got to be very, very careful, because lots of these companies arguably have foreign shareholders, and I think lots of them have majority foreign shareholders.
Sure.
So it would be obvious that the benefits of this deal, meaning the monies, could flow outside the country.
Sure.
So that's fine, but I think there has to be a reasonable balance where it's a win-win situation, so that monies would flow, but there has to be a reasonable benefit that stays in the country, which goes beyond just creating jobs, etc. So I'm saying there has to be a balanced approach, and I'm hoping that government would factor this in when they do the contracting, etc. But I'm in support of this, as long as it's on a balanced, prudent approach, Tehillah.
I mean, smelters are famous for going worldwide trying to find the governments who will subsidize their electricity by offering some benefits like employment. So it's really a cost-benefit analysis by the governments.
Yes, cost-benefit, but of course there's a socio-economic impact here, and the socio-economic will go beyond just the figures. You know, we cannot just treat this as a mathematics thing. I mean, these countries would argue they're creating jobs, but jobs is not the only benefit that the country needs. We need investment or reinvestment of the benefits that we get from these companies in terms of taxes, etc., to stay in the country so that the government could invest into other essential socio-economic sectors or initiatives. So it goes beyond just jobs, etc.
Sure. And it's also strategic minerals. Hopefully South Africa's infrastructure's at a state, or infrastructure pipelines at a stage where we can actually start buying some of those finished products ourselves to boost our infrastructure sector. So, I mean, that should feed into the policy. But let's just focus there on energy. What you mean about a balanced and fair approach, is that what you're talking about, the way that government should allocate the cheaper electricity?
Yeah. In fact, I just alluded to that. Just suffice to say that the balanced approach means there has to be a win-win situation between the beneficiaries of these companies, meaning the shareholders, and SA Incorporated. So it means, yes, we welcome the investment into the economy and the creation of new jobs, but there has to be other investments into areas where the country as a whole can benefit. Besides Eskom, for Eskom itself, this will be a key revenue spinner because these companies use a lot of electricity, and so that will be a key revenue spinner for Eskom, which is a state-owned entity. But yeah, it has to be a balance. Well, the danger is that, you don't want the majority of the monies to be leaving the shores of the country. We've had experiences of that before. We don't want that to happen again.
Absolutely. So essentially, these companies will now, how will it work technically with regards to them being able to collaborate on energy without violating competition laws?
Well, just to keep it simple, and I'm glad the government, Minister Tau, has created an enabler. So this new energy users block exemption with respect to the Competition Act has created an enabler, which means that these companies can now operate, and hopefully we recover our competitive edge. Bearing in mind, China, they subsidize the electricity that these companies use. That's how they become a global leader.
Sure.
And now, arguably, you could say, but why wasn't this done before? Bearing in mind that Eskom, we've come to a rampant stages of load shedding for many, many years, except for the last year. So it wasn't, you couldn't implement this deal when the country was going through a lack of supply.
Sure.
And allocate that benefit to companies that are guzzlers of electricity. Now that Eskom's performing well, actually they're performing extremely well, and I'm hoping that that trajectory continues. We now have about 12 to 14,000 of extra electrons on the grid. I don't believe we'll get back to load shedding. So with that situation, it's now ripe and opportune for us to make this consideration, and let's hope that we reap the benefits of this. Let's call it concession that we're giving to these companies, but we should look at it as an opportunity. Look at it from a glass half full, not glass half empty, because I think if we do it correct, we can get back. In fact, we must get back to where we were leaders in exporting processed minerals. We cannot have a situation where we export our raw materials and other countries, China included, processes those materials, those minerals, and send them back to the country at a profit and dump, and then create huge shifts in the economy negatively.
Like importing iron or importing steel.
Yes, exactly.
Right. I'm speaking to Professor Vali Pariachi. He's a power and energy expert and a former executive manager at Eskom, as well as being a former senior executive at City Power. The time is 12 minutes before 8. And as we wrap up the show, we're talking about energy policy and some of the expectations for the year ahead. So, Prof, you mentioned, of course, the excess energy capacity availability that Eskom has. Is this not the time for South Africa to really ramp up its industrial policy and find companies or industries that would benefit from subsidized electricity?
Yes, I think you raised an interesting point, a key strategic point. I've been asked that question on the side as well. Yes, I think on a prudent manner, I mean, we shouldn't get too excited because we still have some risk in the system.
Sure.
But yes, we should start the strategic thinking in ramping up because for over 100 years, arguably, the mining sector has contributed to the growth and the economy of the country, and we still have significant amounts of resources in the ground, precious minerals or precious metals is now a strategic mineral in the country. So we should leverage on that. And importantly, to answer your question, Tehillah, is that we should ramp up in a massive reindustrialization program, localized program, where we beneficate these minerals, the majority of these minerals, so that the beneficated product, the end product, enjoys better margins, and we can export those because it's a common economic sense. You make more money when you sell a beneficated product than selling the raw material.
Sure.
And it's time that we do that, even as Africa. But
Sure.
I'm glad that our government has seen that as a strategic direction. And now that Eskom's performing well, we can leverage on that strength. And I'm glad that this new initiative, Tehillah, could work well because now the smelter companies will be working in partnership with Eskom and not as a customer to Eskom. So I'm thinking aloud that when you work as a partnership, you work together as a solution. And maybe just for the benefit of the listeners, what does this mean, this new initiative by Minister Parkstyle? It means very essentially that these companies, together with Eskom, will not be constrained by the Competitions Act. They will work together and collaborate and cooperate. And one of the options is that they could come and create an IPP for the benefit of all of them, and use the output, the electrons, or the electricity from a single IPP or multiple IPPs, that all of these distressed companies can tap into. Until now, when I say until now, when this concession was not given, this was not allowed because it could be seen to be colluding.
Sure.
And I think also importantly for this concession, the government and the minister have made it clear you cannot set prices. You cannot collude.
At the end product, there can't be collusion.
Exactly.
There. Right. It only at the input phase with electricity.
Yes.
Right.
Because just the final point on that subject, the majority of these companies, electricity is one of the biggest cost drivers, and it's roughly between 40 and 50%.
Sure.
So when you have 40 to 50% as an input cost, operational cost in these energy-intensive companies, you are at a dead end.
Right.
So if you get concessions to that, at least it will help you to keep the doors open at least and function, but for other economic benefits, and also allow you to remain competitive. All of this must be on a balanced, prudent approach, Tehillah.
Sure. So let's then talk about the year ahead, and especially in April, with the wholesale electricity trading entity coming online, wholesale electricity market coming online. And this, of course, will open up transmission. It will open up a lot of competition to Eskom. Just maybe explain how that will work, if you don't mind, Prof.
I'm glad you asked the question because I'm using my other caps. We're very close to the establishment of that market in terms of the rules, etc. I'm still in that process of doing that. I'm a bit worried to a certain extent because it's a bit early days. It's in April, and I believe all the key stakeholders are completely ready. Although I'm not saying that it's a deal breaker. If I look at Munich, especially Munich, Eskom's a bit more prepared. The market itself. So basically, to keep it simple, what would happen is, which never happened in South Africa the last 100 years. In fact, this new market is going to revolutionize the energy space in South Africa. And I'm not saying this only, other people are saying it. So basically, like other forward-thinking economies in the world, energy will be traded. So to keep it simple, Eskom and the municipality would no longer be monopolistic, which happened for over 100 years. In terms of the new Electricity Regulation Amendment Act, the intent is to move Eskom and the Munichs away from complete monopoly to a complete market environment where energy gets traded on the market. And but I guess there'll be some rough edges, teething issues, and there's a 5-year transition period for that. And my only concern with the market is that we must not be, I'm talking about Eskom and the municipalities, we must be careful that they do not become price takers. In other words, why I'm saying that, if you use the simple economics 101 supply-demand curve, when the supply of electricity is less than the demand, then economics 101 tells you prices go up. Prices go up means that if Eskom and the municipalities, who are no longer in control of the market, it will be done by an independent party, will purchase those electrons at a higher price, and they'll have to transfer that to their customers. And bearing in mind, South Africa, unlike first world countries, the majority of the people, I would argue, are poor people. First world country, the majority, 95% are middle class and rich. Here it's the other way around. So if we get to a situation which could be like Australia and California, which are first world countries, where the prices tilt, and so I'm glad that, and we've, as municipalities, have made a case for price caps. In South Africa, and I argue in Africa, we need to have price caps. We've been quite vocal at that, and I understand that we're moving in that direction of price caps. So at least it'll support the end-use customer, especially the poor and the indigent.
Sure. Interesting what you say about Australia, because it's very unpopular at the moment that they're not using their gas resources for electricity. They've largely moved towards renewables, and it's very unpopular because, of course, as you said there, the prices are so high. But Prof, isn't that the role of NERSA, the energy regulator, to determine prices, to keep prices fair? Although, I mean, they haven't been great at determining those prices, but that is the role of the regulator.
Yeah, that's the role of the regulator, but that's in the regulated market. When you get into the energy market, like we're going into April, it'll be unregulated. There'll be parts of it regulated, but the bulk of it, as I understand, will be unregulated. So NERSA would not have a role there.
So market participants won't have to come to NERSA with their requests for prices or price increases? Well,
it's a moot point because Eskom and municipalities are required as licensed utilities to submit to NERSA a tariff application, and that's what we've been arguing about. Is that the playing field and the competitive playing field is not level, because municipalities and Eskom will just will be given a price tariff which they have to keep for a year on average, and the private sector which comes into the market, they don't have that restriction. Is that competitive? Because they could, when they, and I say this very advisedly, when they negotiate with a customer, especially a large customer, they could virtually, at the same conversation, drop the prices
Sure.
to all of it. So we've made that point quite vocal in our negotiations with NESA. I'm talking about the municipalities, and I think that's being addressed in the new trading rules. So that's the one point. The other point is a technical matter, and you talk about Australia as well. We're going to be very careful, and here I'm making a very balanced scientific engineering view, is that you cannot use a colloquial word, flood the electricity grid with renewables, because if you go beyond a certain threshold, I call that the Valley's sweet spot ratio. You could
we appreciate that term, Prof. Yeah.
You could collapse the electricity grid, because if you look at what we had in Spain, although the final report is not coming, but it's pointing out too that they had excess renewable energy on the grid. I think they had about 70 to 80% in April at the time when the grid collapsed. And so we're going to be very careful, and we're keeping our eyes and ears open as practitioners, as engineers, so that we don't exceed that, what I call the value sweet spot ratio. In other words, there has to be a balance between a certain percentage of renewables and dispatchables like coal, gas, nuclear, and hydro. And there we're saying, even as municipalities, I can say very openly, we support renewables. It's absolutely essential, but there has to be a balanced approach where we move from a high economy to a low carbon economy in a very prudent manner.
So the word I'm taking away from you, Prof, is balance. In everything you've said is balance, the importance of balance.
Yes, exactly, because what underpins all of this is that you can have all the generation from renewables and solar and PV, but if you cannot evacuate that electron from the generator to the customer, it's useless. So what needs to happen is that we need to have a grid, a very stable, resilient grid that can evacuate that electron. And currently we don't have that.
Prof, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but there's so much to talk to you about, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again before the launch, if it goes ahead on the date that's been specified, the wholesale electricity market. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Vali Pariachi. Fascinating insights there for Power and Energy Export, as well as being a former executive manager at Eskom, as well as a former senior executive at City Power.